What's your name? What? Yvonne owns me. April and Miranda are actually, well, they're part of my band when I'm working, you know, and I think she's going to be a superstar, you know, and I think what they have, the soul, is like really, really unique. In fact, I just heard them not last weekend, the weekend before, at the Newark Jazz Festival. No. Yeah. Newark had a little jazz festival. And, or was it Jersey City? But anyway, they were actually, I just love them, you know, and I've always been a big supporter of vocalists because I think jazz has always been the healthiest when vocalists are part of the group. I mean, when you think about it, you know, Ella was down bassing with Ellington, Nancy Wilson was Animal Island, Phyllis Hyman with Norman Connors, Abby Lincoln with Nashville, you know, all of those collaborations were very, very, very successful, you know, and then the musicians got jealous. Yeah, the musicians got jealous somewhere in the late 70s. They stopped letting the singers sing. The singers get more attention. But that's okay. We talk more than we sing, you know, so words, you know, that people, oh, we ready? Yeah. No problem. Yeah, so I've always been a big advocate for vocalists. And it takes pressure off me as a band leader, you know, because it's show business, you know. So I like, you know, the fact that April, you know, she's probably done 8 or 10 concerts with me now. And, you know, at Dizzy's, Coca-Cola, we went down to Texas. We've been a lot of different places. And she's just spectacular. She is really spectacular. And Randall is such a sweet guy. They are very, very sweet. You know, I love their wedding. No, it was virtual because it was during the pandemic. So they had, I think, it looked like we only had about 3 or 4 people there. But it was virtual. But it was somewhat time, you know, because they're just, you know, I mean, I've been doing a million weddings. I'm always going to do a million different weddings. And most weddings, you know, you wonder, you know, their wedding was one of the few that I've been to where I said, oh, this is perfect, you know. And he's not jealous. You see, and I've seen a lot of couples where the woman is a singer and Douglas. Oh my label fell off.
it out? Did they work out?
Oh yeah, I got them straight.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. No, I got it straight. I got it straight.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you got a beard.
This wonderful new release from one of our contemporary giants, Colombia's Monk TS2, to those of y'all who know him. I'm not going to talk too much because we are so deeply honored. I don't like doing that. Because you know, my Facebook and LinkedIn page, you know, I have a picture of Denzel, and I'm slim and tall, big old African. People would be sorely disappointed if they actually saw me after Keanna. But we also, I'm thrilled to have, excuse me, one of the great, I've been saying she's an emerging voice in terms of supporter of this music, a producer, journalist, on-air personality. She's got so many hats. She has a digital footprint in a positive way that's very, very large. And I've said to folks that she is not just the future, but she's the now of jazz. Because as much as folks of my generation, and I'm one of the leading proponents of this, we like to complain and talk smack about young folks. Trust me, I love doing that. They ain't swinging, that sucks. I don't know what else we would want from this generation, because this sister right here, she knows all the stuff that we know. She can pull out some Dexter on you in a second, right? She knows Hank Mobley on that live at Carnegie Hall record we were just talking about. But she's also immersed deeply in the scene today, and they have to be. The art has to stay alive. The music has to reflect the people. The artists have to interpret our times for us. We want them to swing. We want them to know the blues, but they got to figure out what that means in 2022. And this young sister right here is in the vanguard of it. There's a whole crew of her out there, but she's unique. So I'm thrilled whenever I can get her to come in here, do me a solid, either introduce me to some young musicians from DC or elsewhere that I don't know, or, as is the case tonight, come in and expound with my dear brother and bring an elucidation to the proceeds of the evening. So that's Keanna Faircloth. I'm going to turn it over to her.
Wow, Wayne, that's very kind. Thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody. It's so good to see you guys here. It feels so warm. You brought some nice energy here.
Yeah, well, you know, these are a lot of people I know, and an environment that I know, and I've known Wayne for, you know, like 30 years and all that,
Oh, wow.
you know, so I feel very, very comfortable.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So for those of you who don't know out there in Facebook land, this is one of our living legends, if that's okay to say.
Okay,
Ben,
it's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight.
But seriously, you absolutely are band leader, composer, drummer, extraordinaire, T.S. Monk. Give it up, y'all. I'm honored. And we're here celebrating. It's a listening party, so we're going to be listening to cuts from the new record,
Yeah.
Two Continents, One
One
Groove.
groove.
I love it. I love it. We're going to be listening and chatting in between, playing probably one of the most swinging records I've heard as of late. Absolutely, just completely listenable. And you start listening, and before you know it, it's over. I'm like, dang, it's over?
I know. Someone asked me the other day, only 7 tunes, right? And I said, well, my thing is to put your best foot forward. And if your best foot at this particular time was 7 tunes, then 7 tunes it is. But I thank you very, very much for that wonderful introduction to
I love it.
what it might be for those listeners.
I think it's appropriate that it's 7 tracks, 7 steps to heaven, right?
7 steps to heaven.
Which you do play,
Yeah.
of course, on the
Yeah.
record. But first, hold on, I forgot. In honor of today's occasion and those killing glasses on your record, I brought my own.
Oh, yeah.
Because those glasses on the record are killing, first of all.
Yeah, well, they cost me like $15 in Walgreens. See, in my early career, especially going all the way back to my R&B career, I used to buy all kinds of crazy expensive glasses and leave them all over the place, right? and then I realized that when you're taking pictures, if the glasses look great, nobody really knows how much they cost.
Exactly.
You did. So I started going to Walgreens and getting very good-looking glasses for like $12, $15, and then taking pictures in them, and people say, oh, man, the glasses are out of sight. And I say, yeah, and let people assume that they cost me $1 million. But they don't. These are some bad Motorola's right here.
Yeah.
I know that, right? I think these were like $12.95 at
Wow.
Walgreens.
I love it. I love it. And nobody can rock them like you.
Oh, and those are outrageous.
Thank
those
you.
are
They were about
outrageous.
$12 too from
You
Amazon.
did? You know the deal. You know the deal.
Except I can't see, so I'm gonna take them off. I'm really blind. But I want to start off, first of all,
Sure.
Two Continents, One Groove.
Mhm.
You recorded this over a number of years
Yeah.
across 2 continents, here in New York and in Switzerland.
And in Switzerland, yeah. And, people assume that when I say one groove, I'm talking about like one kind of tune. But what I'm really talking about with this particular record is the same band, because it's a funny thing. You'll hear somebody with a band in San Francisco, and you say, oh, man, that band was outrageous. Then you hear the same band in New York a few months later, you say, they didn't really sound that good,
Why is that?
right?
Why do you think that is?
Because it's hard to get one groove psychologically, right? To get everybody on the same page psychologically. And this particular band on this CD, this particular ensemble was just on it. I've been very, very fortunate over the last 28 years now since I started because I, for those of you who don't know, I didn't start my jazz career until I was 42, so I was kind of late, but I've been very, very fortunate to have extraordinarily good bands all the time. That's why for those of you who see the CD, you'll see the CD has my band logo on it, and it says T.S. Monk Band, because I am a band leader, in the tradition of, hopefully, of the great drummer band leaders, because I found out, as quiet as it's kept, people don't really understand drum solos. I know you're laughing, but it's true. And if you really look, starting with Chick Webb, going all the way back to Chick Webb, who had Ella with him, right? You know, it was the band. Buddy Rich's big band. Max Roach, Uptown Double Quintet. Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Roy Haynes and his hip ensemble. Even as you move into R&B, you had Maurice White, who was the drummer, actually the drummer for Ramsey Lewis in the beginning. You know, you got Mac Fleetwood, you got Phil Collins. It's the band that gets you over when you're a drummer. And so it's important to me to make sure that I have a great band. See, if I rely on drum solos, first of all, they get in the way. They get in the way, and more often than not, people respond to the fact that they don't know what the drummer's doing, but he's doing a lot, right? So he starts a drum solo, right? And everybody says, oh, yeah. And then he plays more. And people go, yeah, it's a lot. And then he plays more, and you go, and it's almost like through attrition that you get applause. But it's not the kind of applause that you get when, you know, that a saxophonist or a trumpet player or a pianist get, you know. But on the other hand, when you go and you see a good drummer and the band is rocking, and somebody says to you, did you like the drummer? You say, oh man, the drummer was on it. The drummer was on it because the band was rocking. Right. And so the one groove for this particular CD is in fact my band. And you know,
Tell us who's in the band, because you
the
got some
band,
killing cats.
it's interesting. Tenor saxophone is a gentleman who has played here relatively recently. His name is Willie Williams. And Willie Williams has been with me since 1992. He is the only original T.S. Monk Jazz Band member. And let me tell you about Willie. Willie started out with TSOP, the Sounds of Philadelphia, right? And Willie was in the studio. Basically, it was illegal. He was like, 14, 15 years old. He wasn't supposed to be there. He's breaking all the rules. But Willie is like one of the guys playing flutes on Close the Door with Teddy Pendergrass. Wow. He's playing on Dexter Wansell records. He's playing on all those Philly International records. And then when I met him, we were playing actually in Clifford Jordan's big band, right? And he was a member of Arthur Taylor and his Wailers. And Art Taylor got angry with me when I grabbed Willie because he said I stole Willie, but Willie is a wonderful, one of the greatest tenor saxophonists that we have in the world today. And now he has a son by the name of Ace that is rocking on the trumpet. It's like crazy how good this kid is. And I love Willie Williams. So we have Willie Williams on tenor saxophone. Sometimes you go and you hear a band, right? And the band leader will be announcing the band members, and they'll say, well, so-and-so is on it, and he played with everybody, right? Well, there's a guy that works with me by the name of Patience Higgins on alto saxophone. Patience Higgins has played with everybody. No jive. I mean, literally. Everybody, whether you talk about Aretha Franklin, you talk about Sweet Honey in the Rock, you talk about Frank Sinatra, it doesn't matter. Patience has played with them. And he's a fantastic alto saxophone player that has mastered all the reeds. So he's done some things with me. I've had him play tenor. I've had him play baritone. I've had him play flute. He can play anything. And I've known Patience probably for about 30 years. But we were in different parts of the music for a long time. But in recent years, over the past decade or so, he's been performing with me, and I love Patience Higgins. On bass is a gentleman that was here I think Wayne told me very recently by the name of Kenny Davis. And Kenny Davis is what I call a certified badass. No jive on the bass. No jive on the bass. Let me tell you, as a drummer and as a member of the rhythm section, when you got a bass player that can drop them bombs and stomp and, I mean, just get up under everything and rock and play the bottom, you know. You have a bass player that's not a frustrated guitarist playing all up in the top of the bass, but playing in the bottom of the bass. I mean, Kenny Davis, I also met him when I was playing with Clifford Jordan's big band, and Kenny has produced and performed for years with Cassandra Wilson. He also was a member of the Tonight Show band with Branford Marcellus for many years, and I love Kenny Davis. On trumpet is a young man. When for many, many years, I was the chairman of the board of an organization called the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. And we were the premier jazz education organization on planet Earth, straight up. But at the time that we founded the Monk Institute, there were 3 places where you could really go to learn to play, right? One was with David Baker out of the University of Indiana. One was with Nathan Davis down in Pennsylvania. And the third place was with Jackie McLean up in Hartford, Connecticut. And on trumpet is a young man by the name of Josh Evans, who is one of the prize students of the great Jackie McLean. And he is a writer in his own right. He has his own big band. If you go to YouTube, you can find him with his own big band. And he's in the tradition of Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw and Clifford Brown and all those cats, Lee Morgan. I mean, this is an explosive young trumpet player who is also very aware historically, because there's a composition, there's a ballad on this record. It's called Ernie Washington. And people say, well, who the hell is Ernie Washington, right? It just so happens that in the 1950s, jazz musicians in New York City had to have what they called a cabaret card. And the cabaret card was essentially a license to work in the clubs. And for many artists, particularly those who were nonconformists, let's say, such as my father, such as Billie Holiday, Bud Powell, and many others, it was used as a weapon. And so if they took your cabaret card away, you couldn't work in New York. But it was also a time in America where, I hate to say this, but you know, I'm old enough to remember when we all looked the same to white America, you know, and so, and so Thelonious Monk had his cabaret card taken away, right? And in those days, the union representatives would run around to the clubs taking graft, getting bribed all the time to let guys work. But they were knuckleheads, and we all looked the same. And so my father, right, in order to work, changed his name to Ernie Washington, right? And so he worked around New York, and the union reps would come in, and they'd look at Thelonious Monk and say, oh, no, that's Ernie Washington over there on the piano. And that's how he works. And so that's who Ernie Washington is. So that tune is actually a tribute by Josh Evans to Thelonious Monk.
Wow.
Yeah. And then finally, there's a young lady right now. She was on the cover of Jazz Times magazine, I think a month ago or maybe 2 months ago. She is a graduate of the first class of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz in 1998 under the tutelage of Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, and Wayne Shorter, right? Now, I have to tell you, when this young lady came into the class, I remember the first day, because we had like 7 extraordinary students, right? But when she sort of stood up in the class, I could see all the fellas, total chauvinism. I could see the fellas in the class were looking at like, who is this, right? First of all, she was a woman, okay? Second of all, she was from Houston, Texas, which was not one of the bastions of jazz, you know? And third of all, she was Asian, right? And they were just kind of looking cross-eyed at her. Let me tell you something. After I heard this young lady play, I remember telling Helen, I said, Helen, you're gonna be a star. I don't know what these other cats are doing, but you are gonna be a star, because she swings like she invented rope, right? She writes brilliantly, and she's as sweet as candy. This is such a complete human being, and she rocks my record down. Helen has been playing with me now for a good 15 years, you know, and she's just extraordinary. Her performance on all these tunes is just absolutely extraordinary. So this particular combination of musicians on this record was exceptional. I knew that it was, and I pride myself, right, on the ability to create an environment. See, because band leading, it's like separate. It's not about starring, you know, and I've said this often, that those of us who have the privilege and the fortune to have our name on the marquee are just privileged and fortunate. Because in a jazz ensemble, it's musical democracy. Everybody is the leader, depending upon what point you are in a particular composition. When somebody is taking a solo, they are the leader. And I call it democracy because just as it is in a democratic society, the team is dedicated to the individual, and the individual is dedicated to the team, right? But what one has to do, what is very important, and this is what I learned from Art Blakey and Roy Haynes and Max Roach and Buddy Rich and all these guys, you have to create an environment so that people feel like they're at home. Yeah. And when guys and gals are in a band and they feel like they are at home, that's when they bring out their A game every time. And I've kind of had the ability to do this since I was a little boy on the block. I could get cats together and get everybody just rocking with the same mentality. And I was able to do it with this particular ensemble. And let me tell you something, by the way. Jazz is not the most lucrative business in the world.
Absolutely not.
You know? And so often, sometimes, you know, often a gig comes up that really don't pay. It really don't pay much, okay? And when guys and gals feel like the ensemble that they are part of is like a home, when they feel like they can do their thing, when they feel like they have a vested interest in the creative process of that ensemble, that's when they will work for very, very little money. Not because that's the only money they can make. Because everybody I use, everybody I just named works. They work like crazy, you know? So how do I get them to work with me when I call? It's because they know that my father's philosophy was do your thing, be yourself. And we all know, everybody in this room knows, that any environment where you can be yourself, that's the environment you want to be in. That's where you want to be. And that's what I try to do. I try to create that environment for my band members, and it shows in the end product because, like I said, everybody brings their A game, and it's not about who's the best because there is no best. You know, It's about everybody just supporting the endeavor collectively. And I've had lots of situations myself where I've said, I'm not the strongest player on this bandstand, you know? And I think a classic example of that mentality and that ability to corral and to make everybody feel like they're at home is probably Miles Davis circa 1958. If you listen to those records, Miles had Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, Paul Chambers, Wynton Kelly and Red Garland, Philly Joe Jones in those bands, right? You could make a case that Miles was not necessarily the strongest player in them bands. But you know what? He had the ability to get all of those timeless players on the same page so that they produced music like So What? They produced music like Kind of Blue. They produced fantastic music together. And that's what I try to do, you know, so that's who my band members are. And that's why they work so hard for me.
And that's certainly what you've done on this record, which is, by the way, your first live record?
My first live record
Why'd you take so long?
because live records suck as a rule. Everybody knows, you know, especially, you know, like, you know, when everybody was younger and you ran and got that live, the Temptations live, and you put that record on and said, oh man, where's the real record? I need the real record, you know, because it's very, very difficult to catch even a great artist on a great night. It's kind of like potluck, you know? So I've always been afraid, but, you know, this pandemic's got everybody doing all kinds of stuff that they never did before, you know? And so I wanted to put something out. And also, y'all don't know it, and I don't act like it, but the reality is that, what is this? This is June?
Yeah.
The very end, like the last couple of days of January, I had open heart surgery. You know, that's when they crack you open like a goddamn lobster, right? I didn't have a heart attack, but I did have a problem. And so I couldn't, you know, that's why I'm not playing for you right here tonight, you know, because the doctors say, man, you got to cool it one because you're kind of like a wild man on the drums and you get, you know, you got to chill out for a minute. And so between the open heart surgery and the fact that I pulled up these tapes and I found all these great performances, you know, that's why it's a live album now. Very shortly, I will be going in the studio to do my, I think it's my 13th or 14th studio album, you know, but I feel very, very fortunate, you know, to be here because, you know, it's not guaranteed. And hey, it's not, you know, in the past year, past 2 years really, I've lost some really close friends like, you know, Roy Hargrove and Wallace Roney and, you know, Jerry Allen and Mtume. You know, Mtume lived around the corner from me for years. And so I realized that tomorrow is promised to no one, you know, and so so here I am with the live record, and I have to tell you that I'm very excited about this record. This is a goddamn good record.
It is.
It is.
It absolutely is. And I want to play something from the album
Sure.
as we talk here. What do you want to play first?
Well, you know,
because from the very beginning, from Sierra, which I do want to talk about because I know that's dedicated to someone. Absolutely love it. For you to choose that one as the first one out the gate, it's like guns blazing.
Yeah, Sierra, we could play that, but probably, you know, I had a very, very, very close friend. In 1980, I was an R&B artist, right? And in 1980, I released a record, a single, along with my sister and my girlfriend called Bon Bon V, right? And
Y'all heard of that? At every cookout ever that I've ever been to, Bon Bon V has to play. It's always on the playlist.
I can't believe that 40 years later, people still love this record. I feel very, very fortunate and very, very blessed. But that band, I started with the son of one of the great, great pianists that ever lived. His name was Randy Weston. And Randy had a son by the name of Azadine. And Azadine was, for me, really the greatest conga player I ever heard. And he played with Dizzy, and he played with Miles, and he played with Randy, and he played with Aman Jamal. But we started the R&B band together. And then he went through some trials and tribulations in life, and so he never really got on the road with me, although he is on Bon Bon V. And Randy, you know, my father had a thing for writing tunes for people he loved, right? So he wrote a tune called Little Rudy Tooty for me, right? And he wrote a tune called Crepuscule with Nellie for my mother. And he wrote one called Skippy. That was my mother's sister. She was crazy. And he wrote one for Bud Powell, the great Bud Powell, called In Walk Bud. He wrote one called Oscar T, and I never could figure out who Oscar T was. But he wrote one called Oscar T. And so in that tradition, I wrote one for this record called Sierra for my daughter. But the first one I'd like you to play, is a tune that Randy Weston wrote for his son Azadine. And Azadine's, actually his God-given name was Niles. And Randy wrote this tune called Little Niles. And maybe you play a little taste of Little Niles, because it's just a wonderful performance. And I miss my friend. I really miss my friend.
Randy Weston had a son. His name was Azadine Weston. His given name was Niles. This is by Randy Weston. This is entitled Little Niles.
keep it low underneath of us a little bit. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Where was this one recorded, in New York or Switzerland?
That was recorded. Oh, right. This one was recorded at Jenny's in Harlem, in the Red Rooster, in 2015, I think. And we, you know, Josh is just, you know, sometimes when you listen to music that you perform, you know, it's like it's a world in and of itself. You know? So I remember at the time when we were actually I remember playing this, and I remember saying to myself, "Wow, he sounds awful good. He sounds awfully strong, and he's just got a command." You know, often these days, you hear a lot of young players that have gone to school, and they tend to play formulas. They don't necessarily lean on the melody. But when a player leans on the melody, like a Monk, like a Hubbard, like a Coltrane, like a Miles, like a Cannonball, when they lean on the melody, their solos make sense. You know, when they breathe and don't just play, you know, I mean, so many times you hear young players and they'll just play 3 million notes. They don't even know how to take a breath. Don't even know how to take a breath. But when you hear a young player like that who can take a breath, who can make sense, who's from one idea to the next, things are actually connected. It's just wondrous. Yeah.
That one really does feel special. It like smolders. I'm wondering if you chose the tracks for this record based on that feeling you said you got on the bandstand.
Oh, definitely.
Each one did you choose based on the feeling you remember?
Yeah. Because it's just like when you, even when you're making records, you remember that particular situation. You know, you remember what you were doing. You remember the vibe in the room. You remember what the crowd was like. You know, and so so all these tunes, you know, because I mean I had a bunch more tunes that I could have packed this record up with 13 tunes, you know, but I said these 7 are special moments in my life. In my life, because you have to remember that a jazz recording is just a snapshot. It's how you felt playing that particular composition at that moment, in that place, with those people. And you can't, and that's why so many jazz musicians, you want to hear them live, because the recording, it's not like commercial records, you know, which, yeah, it's a snapshot, but it's a snapshot designed to be viewed over and over and over again, you know, and when you go hear the live version of it, you want to hear the snapshot. You know, that's why people, you know, you hear a top 10 record, and then you go hear the artist, and then, you know, when they don't sing that particular line or that particular note, you say, oh, man, he didn't sing my part. Yeah. you know, but that's not what jazz is about, you know, and when you go hear a jazz artist, you expect that it ain't gonna be the same as it was on the record, you know, but those moments on the records are absolutely fabulous. And that particular night, what Josh was playing there, you know, I mean, I'm kind of a nut because I memorize all these performances. I memorize the performances on my records the way most people memorize the lyrics to a tune. So, you know, I could have actually sat here and sung that solo along with you, because it was just magical and it makes so much sense. And when a solo makes sense, you can sing along with it, you know. And it can be John Coltrane, but you can sing along with that solo when the solo makes sense. Now, when the solo doesn't make sense, you really can't sing along with it.
Right.
You
Get
know,
lost.
so, you know, that particular, and let me tell you something. He takes off on that. He was just getting rolling. And then Helen plays a piano solo on that. That's ridiculous. Now, I also play a solo on that particular composition. But like I told you, you know, people don't understand drum solos. So, you know, so I don't talk much about my solo.
It's killing.
But the
You're
piano
humble.
solo and the trumpet solo on that are fabulous.
Yes, indeed. The quality of sound on this record is pristine, and I do want to talk a little bit about another one of our living legends, John Lee, but also your son, who is a co-producer on this record as
Yeah,
well.
well, my son keeps
Wave
me
your hand,
cool.
he's here.
Where is he?
He's in the back.
Oh, in the back, yes. That's what,
The fourth.
for those of you who don't know, because for many, many years, everybody thought I was Thelonious Monk Jr. But I'm not Thelonious Monk Jr. The guy that you love, the guy that wrote Around Midnight and Straight No Chaser and all that, that's Thelonious Monk Jr. The guy back there at 6'4.5" is Thelonious Monk the Fourth. Yeah. And I'm the third. You know, and I had to straighten that out because, you know, our heritage, given that, you know, African-American heritage is so lost in this country, I said, you know, I better start actually keeping track of this
Yeah.
stuff, you know. So I just, all I ask of him is that maybe before I leave the planet, there'll be a Thelonious Monk the Fifth. But
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know. No pressure.
but you know, I love him. I love him.
Yeah.
So he takes care of me. And John Lee is a brilliant engineer. John, and a brilliant bass player. He also he directs the Dizzy Gillespie Legacy Big Band, and I've known John also. Yeah, it's funny. Most everybody associated with this particular record, I've known for, you know, at least 25, 30 years. It's crazy. So that makes me feel good. Also, with John Lee and I worked on this record to get that sound that you hear. So although it's a live record, you know it's live because there's an audience, but it doesn't have all the warts that you hear on a lot of live recordings where the balance is strange and, you know, sometimes the saxophone sounds like a kazoo and things like that you would ordinarily have with a live record. And that's why John, you know, I told John, you know, halfway through mixing this record, I said, John, you're producing this record with me, man. And I got to put you down as an associate producer because you're the engineer, yeah, but you're doing some things, man. You're doing some things with them dials that I can't necessarily do, you know. So I love John. I love John Lee.
Let's play another one. What do you want to go to now?
We can play a little bit of Sierra. I wrote this for my daughter, and I don't think is she here? Oh, no, my daughter's not here. Oh, is she sick? Oh, my goodness. Well, anyway, and she's very flattered that I wrote this tune. I got one actually for Thelonious back there, too, that's going to be on my next studio album.
Oh.
But this is in my father's tradition, which is writing tunes for people he loves. And so I wrote this one for my daughter that I love. And this is a really, really swinging tune. I have to say that this is a really, really swinging tune.
It is.
You know, and I think it's got a relatively memorable melody you know, because I'm into melody, you know,
Yeah, I
I'm
can
not
hear
into
that.
technique, you know. I often tell people, you know, if you give me like, you know, those chimpanzees they used to have back in the 60s that they used to put in the satellites and they could go up. They're real smart. I mean, really, really smart chimpanzees, right? I said, you give me one of them chimpanzees and you give me a nice big stack of ripe bananas and I'll get that, I will get that chimpanzee to play a paradiddle with the sticks, you know, because technique, you know, jazz is not about technique. Jazz is about a feeling in your heart.
Right.
You know, you need technique, but it's what you do with that technique that really counts. You know, and and so, you know, I believe that, you know, compositions are not about technique. You know, even the highly technical compositions that we got out of guys like Charlie Parker. I mean, some of the heads of his tunes, you certainly needed technique, but they didn't come from technique. And sometimes I wonder, because you know, you go to school and you know, kids, you know, they're talking about, well, you know, yeah, this tune, you know, it's in the Lydian mode, and you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I say, man, do you really think that Miles Davis and John Coltrane were thinking about that when Coltrane was playing Giant Steps? You think he was thinking about that? No. Technique is just a tool. But, and so Sierra is is about a feeling. And it reminds me of my daughter. It's kind of hot and cool. And she's kind of hot and cool, you know, and she's a little bit unpredictable. So it goes one place and then it goes somewhere else that you wouldn't expect that it would go. And it just reminds me of my daughter. So check it out.
Sierra. This is the first track on the album.
This is the first track on the album.
like, you know. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. We were talking before about how, you know, when you're singing, you have a tendency to want to play as you sing, play
Yeah.
drums. And now there's a whole new generation that I feel like are imitating you in a way.
Yeah, well, you know, part of it is that people don't know that, like, I have an album called Crosstalk, right? And on Crosstalk, I perform a tune by Oscar Brown Jr. called Somebody Buy Me a Drink. And I also perform a duet with a wonderful artist out of Chicago by the name of Patricia Barber. And we do a rendition of Just a Little Lovin'. And both of those tunes, I sang while I was playing. So people don't know that I actually do this. Later on, probably at the beginning of next year, I have a version of Oscar Brown Jr. I love Oscar Brown Jr. He did a piece called Bid 'Em In, and it's actually a slave auctioneer's call selling a young black woman. And I first heard that in 1964. And I said, one day I'm gonna perform that while I'm playing my drums. And I remember when so I performed it, I recorded it live at Jenny's. And I've mixed it, so it's kind of ready for release. I haven't released it yet. But I remember when I was mixing it, I was sitting there with John Lee, and we had been mixing it for hours and hours and hours. And finally he said to me, he said, "Yeah, Mom, so, you know, who's playing while you're rapping this thing, right?" And I said, "What do you mean, who's playing while I'm rapping this thing?" He said, "No, you know, you got this wild rap going on, and who's playing the drums for you?" And I said, "Well, that's me, John. I'm playing the drums." And he said, "What?" Right? And that's just the way I like to do it. You know, I could not stand here and sing you a song. I could not do it. But you put me behind that drum set there, and I'll sing all night long.
Wow.
It's really funny, but I'm kind of in the tradition of, you know, there was a great rock and roll artist by the name of Buddy Miles, who used to play with Jimi Hendrix. He used to sing and play. Mac Fleetwood sings and plays. Maurice White was a drummer. Phil Collins, everybody knows Phil Collins sings and plays. And I like to sing and play. That's just my thing when it comes to singing. But I would recommend that besides this album here, you could just, if you check out Crosstalk, I think you'll be amazed, and you're probably going to say, "Oh, Monk was bullshitting. He ain't playing while he's singing this stuff." But I actually am. I love doing that.
That's incredible. You seem to have like an eye and an ear for great talent, you know, the next generation of this music. So I kind of want to talk about, because I know Art Blakey gave you your first set of drums.
Yeah.
And now you are sort of, you know, I feel like one of the Art Blakeys of today, and you're taking along the next generation with you. So I want to talk about the importance of mentorship.
Well, you know, when I started, I was 15, and my father called Art Blakey and said, "You know, man, the kid wants to play the drums, and I need some drums. He needs some drums." And Art Blakey sent me some drums. And then my father called up Max Roach, and he said, "Look, the kid wants to play the drums, and you're the greatest drummer in the world, and I'm sending him to your house," and hung up. literally, and hung up the phone and said, go over to Max Roach's house. So I always felt like I was given. I was just given this. There was no money and transfer involved or anything like that. I was given, you know, what talent I have in the same tradition as, you know, that came with us from Africa, which was word of mouth, which was, you know, right in my face. And so that's one of the reasons why I founded the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. And for 28 years, we never charged one of our students anything. And, you know, Marcus Roberts came out of the Monk Institute, and Joshua Redmond came out of the Monk Institute, and Jackie Terrison came out of the Monk Institute, and Camille, what can I think of her names?
Thurman?
No, the singer, young singer from France, you know, and Jane Monheit came out of,
Surreal?
yes, Cyril came out of the Monk Institute winner. And none of them ever, you know, all we did was push. You just push young talent. Right now, performing in my band, actually, this is funny. So I tell you, Willie Williams has been with me since 1992, right? And Willie's working on his own band with his son. So he comes to me one night and he says, you know, Monk, you know, I gotta do my own thing, you know, so I gotta leave you, right? So I said, well, man, you done put in 27 years with me at the time, you know, 26 years. I said, you gotta do your thing. Plus you got your son Ace, you wanna get him straight, so no problem. So, so then my sextet, I've always had a sextet, got cut down to a quintet. You know, almost as 5 people. And I had a young man performing with me on the trumpet by the name of Randall Haywood. Right, so we were performing at Dizzy's Coca-Cola, and we were standing there and we were talking, and his lady, who is now his wife, she was standing there listening to the conversation. I was talking about, yeah, man, you know, I gotta get a new tenor player, man. What am I gonna do? This is funny, because he set me up. I was set up. So I was standing there with him talking about I got to get a new tenor player, and his wife-to-be is standing next to me, and he says to me, with her standing there now, talking about pressure, he says to me, well, Monk, did you ever consider adding a singer? Right? And this beautiful young woman, who happened to be a fabulous singer, is standing right next to her. What could I do? What could I do?
You were cornered.
So I was cornered, so I said, all right, she's in the band. And so Randall Haywood and his wife are in my band when I'm performing, but they have their own band. They're called SOAR, and her name is April May, and she is absolutely
Indeed.
fabulous,
She
a
is.
fabulous singer, and together they make fabulous, fabulous music. And so I'm mentoring them. I took Jane Monheit on the road with me.
Wow.
I took Satchel Van Zandani on the road with me. I took Rachel Price, another wonderful singer, on the road with me, and a young man by the name, who's a fabulous trumpet player by the name of Winston Byrd. I featured him on the road with me, and I like pushing young artists because I got pushed, and it was given to me, you know, and I've always said, you know how people say hi ho at Christmas time? I've always said I owe. And I feel like I do. And I tell them all, listen, all I need is you to just put me in your resume. Just put my name in your resume.
Who wouldn't want to? is
So
the
I can
thing.
say, that, oh yeah, they started out with me, and I'm delighted to do that. And I will always do that for young artists, because young artists need to be pushed. And sure, that's why I've spoken so highly of this young man, Josh Evans, who's on this recording, because he's just a brilliant, writing for a big band is difficult. It's very, very difficult. And I think, if I can in some way help to foster his career and push him forward, I would love to do that. In fact, we do a version of 7 Steps to Heaven,
Yeah, can I play it?
or that you should play. I think he's the second soloist. And when you hear him, I mean, you just say, damn. That I always say that, yeah.
Is it playing? Y'all got the sound up? There we go.
Willie. That was Willie.
Get a drummer song. Incredible. I don't really like to hear versions of 7 Steps unless it's good. So,
And let me tell you about this. That's why we took 1 chorus each, right? And again, everybody just put their best foot forward, and then who was it? Was it Clark Terry? No, it wasn't Clark Terry. Who was it? I can't remember who it was. I remember this one of the real grandmasters once said to me, sometimes you got to take a chorus, pack your stuff up, and go home. You dig? Don't wear out your welcome. You dig? And with a tune like Miles, 7 Steps to Heaven, it's very easy to wear out your welcome. You dig? But I said, no, we're going to do, this is going to be a 2.5 minute recording. And everybody just, boom, one take, whatever you play, you're going to have to live with it for the rest of your life. and there it is, and get out. So that's how we did, because, you know, the thing I feel about classic recordings is that if you can't improve it, leave it alone. You know, leave it alone. And so many times I hear people take, you know, like, you know, you cannot improve on so what?
Right.
You know, and so I hear people play it all the time, and I say, so what? You know, because what they dropped on that recording that day was unbelievable. And it's funny, I'll tell you about so what, a feeling I have. I had a road person that used to set up my drums and break them down and all that. So we were setting up for this concert, and So What was playing, right? And he said, Mom, I said, what? He said, man, do you hear that? Do you dig? Man, when they finished that recording, they must have said, oh man, this is unbelievable. I said, let me tell you something about that generation. That generation. First of all, somebody didn't like that take. That's number one. Somebody did not like that take at all, and is probably in their grave miserating about, why did they take that take? I played so well on the take before that. So you got that problem. I said, Paul Chambers and John Coltrane were dope fiends at the time. So, you know, as soon as they finished that recording, they wanted to get the hell out of the studio and go get high. I said, the bottom line is, for that generation, that's what they did. That's what they did. 6, 7 nights a week. That's how they sounded all the time. They could have done that recording in a telephone booth, you know? My father's generation, Coltrane, Miles, Bud, Dizzy, Bird, Art, Max, all them cats, they set a bar that is so high, it is so high that you really can't mess with it. You can't do nothing with it. All you can do is say, yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So I was trying to explain to this young musician, I said, no, they were not enamored with that recording that day. That was just what they do, you know? And they probably worked that night and laid down totally different solos that fried everybody's brain in the club, you know? And then they went to the next town and the next town and the next town. It's an amazing thing.
Incredible. Yeah, if you can't do it justice, leave it alone. You
Leave it
certainly,
alone.
y'all did that justice.
So I knew we had
With respect for the melody, but
well,
also
the
put your
integrity,
own
the composition. See,
spin.
lots of times people don't, and this is something that I really dislike, and there's probably listeners and people on Facebook that I think, you know, that I'm a drag when I say this, but I don't like the fact that a lot of times young artists, they destroy the compositional integrity of the composer.
Right. You can't even recognize it
You-
sometimes.
yeah, sometimes, exactly. They're playing a version of a tune, and you say, what tune is that? You know, just, it's like singers, you know. When a singer can really sing, just sing me the Star Spangled Banner. Just sing me the Star Spangled, straight up, boom. You know, like Whitney Houston did it, where she just laid it down like it was written. But people like to editorialize. People always think they can improve on something when sometimes you can't improve.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone.
Right.
You know, shoot, Ella Tisket a Tasket. You can't, there's nothing you can do with that. And that's what, 75 years old? There's nothing you can do with it. You know?
Exactly. Wow. This has been incredible. I could really talk to you all night long, man. just a wealth.
You
of
let me,
knowledge.
you let me talk, and when, Wayne didn't warn you, if you let me talk.
Well, your son did. He
I was-
did warn
did
me,
he?
I told him I'm happy about it and I'm welcome to it, because what you don't want is somebody who's not willing to talk. And so,
Oh, well, my father's generation, they wanted to talk, but nobody wanted to listen. So they were under-documented. Think about this. Think about this, you folks out there. Most people know Charlie Parker as a sound coming out of a horn. Most people do not know what his voice sounded like. They don't know anything about the man Charlie Parker. But if you ever had the fortune to hear Charlie Parker, he sounded like a Harvard graduate, because the intellect that was coming out of that horn was the intellect of the man himself. And so I've always felt that my father and mother, they were very slick. My father kept me practically on his leg, but he also sent me to fancy schools, right? Because he wanted me to get the philosophy of the music and know how to articulate it, And so I've always felt like there's been a few people like myself, like Winton, like Mtumi, who could articulate what this music is actually about to the man in the street, to the common man. Now, personally, I've always said, you give me a dude that comes from the back hills of West Virginia that ain't never heard nothing but a Jew's harp in his life, and you put him in a room with me, and 2 hours later, I'll have him running to go buy a Charlie Parker record, because I can explain jazz, See, jazz is not a technique, it's a philosophy. It's the most human music on the planet, It's about being yourself. It's about communicating. It's about everybody has something to say, It's about, as I said earlier, democracy, the dedication of the team to the individual and the individual to the team. All of that stuff. When we started International Jazz Day in 2014-15 at the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, of the 196 countries on the planet, I think we had 194 of them, because jazz is practiced in every country on the planet. It is the only genre. Now, I love Michael Jackson, but there's some places on this planet where you play Michael Jackson, they'll cut your head off. But this music called jazz was the greatest musical gift to the planet. And there are those folks who think jazz is about being African American, but it's not. It's about being human. And so all of those qualities that African Americans happen to have been denied in this country came out in their music, came out in this thing called jazz. And when you go to South Africa, you get one kind of jazz. You go to New Orleans, you get another kind of jazz. And you go to Havana, you get a different kind of jazz. And you go to Rio, you get another kind of jazz. And if you go to Beijing, you get Chinese jazz. And if you go to Australia, you get Australian jazz. And it goes on and on and on and on and on like that, because this is the music of humanity. Be yourself. Be who you are. Be who you are. Your life experience comes out in the music. And the great ones like Duke Ellington, my father, Herbie Hancock, Billy Strayhorn, the great writers, they always took from everywhere, And jazz has been what I call the not necessarily willing amputee of all the other genres,
Right.
So, the open and close hi-hat of disco, that was something that Art Blakey used to do. Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock brought the electric piano into what we call classic R&B. The the Cornell Duprees and Wes Montgomerys and George Bensons brought the modern jazz electric guitar into R&B music, you know. So this jazz thing, that's why it's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And every genre has an era, right? The biggest era, musical era, was the jazz era. The jazz era went from World War I all the way down to the 1950s. My father's got a very eclectic tune called Brilliant Corners. That tune was in the jukeboxes in the 1950s. That's how jazz has been so pervasive. You know, rock and roll's had a run, hip hop's got a little run going, country's had a little run, but jazz, like I said, went from World War I, James Reese, Europe, right, 369th Armored Band, all the way down to the 1950s. It's an amazing, I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah, and it continues to evolve. Indeed. T.S. Monk, thank you so much for this. Get the album, Two Continents, One Groove. We do have some time for questions, but I want to ask you guys some questions because we actually have some albums to give away if you can chime in here. Is that cool?
Yes.
All right, I got a question for the folks. I'm going to test if you were listening. So, who gave T.S. his first drum set? You got to, wait a minute, you got to raise your hand and tell me if you want a record. All right, this man, he gets a record. Thank you.
That was crazy.
Let's see. All right, what is the very first track on Two Continents, One Groove? Who can tell me that? What's the name of it? Yes, you get a record. So we got two over here. Let's see. Who we got? Let's see. You can ask a question too. Make sure the folks are listening. This is quiz time.
What is the meaning of Two Continents, One Groove?
That's a good one. Who was listening? Oh, you already got a record. I know. We're going to see if somebody else. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh,
He gets a record.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, how many more we got? How many records we got to give away? I think we got two more.
Huh? No.
Right?
No, let me tell you. I'll tell you why. Because when people come out to just listen to me talk, that's a privilege. That's a privilege. And the way I talk, it ain't got nothing to do with money. It has to do with the vibe, you know. I got plenty of time to sell records, you know, and hopefully I'll sell some thousands of records over the next couple of months. But here right now with this group,
Wow.
I just want to, you
That's
know.
beautiful. Thank you. I got a question for the folks. Here's one. I'm going to put my glasses on for this one. How much did he pay for these glasses that he's wearing on the record? Yes. Okay, that's a roundabout.
Yeah,
it's
that's
about $12.
close.
Okay, all right, we're going to give it to you. Yes. $12.95 it is. And to add to that, why does he not pay over a certain amount of money now for glasses? I see you in the back. Yes.
Right.
He gets a record. And I think that's all the records we got to give away. Is that all of them? We got more? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question
Sure.
for Mr. Monk, then you get a record. Anybody have any questions? Something you always wanted to ask about? Yes. Okay. Indeed.
Thank you.
Oh, take it to
Thank you.
PBS. Oh, well, thank you. I will be honored. She gets a record for that. We receive it.
Definitely.
We receive it. Yes, we do. Okay. Okay, Wayne. What's your que-
Tell the story about this. Is such a great. This, by the way, give this cat a hand right here. This is one of our. This is one of our mascots. And cats don't. It ain't like these dropped out of the sky. Folks don't give these away, y'all. No. This is who this man is. You see what I'm saying? And this is walking history right here. Okay, tell the story of. Tell the story of. Who was the cat that first played with your buddy who played with your father? And you didn't get the gig. They were the Vanguard.
Oh, man. My- okay. Okay, this is the last story I'll tell, but so I have to sort of set it up. So Max Roach gives me a set of sticks when I'm 4 years old, but I don't get the feeling until I'm in private school and I'm 13 years old. And a kid in my dormitory gave me a pair of sticks because his name was Frank Serena, and he thought he was Gene Krupa, right? He's always running around, he's tapping on everything, and the bug got me. So he gave me a pair of sticks, and I start practicing at school, and then I go home for a vacation, but I don't take the sticks home with me, right? But when I was 15, things kind of reached critical mass, and that's when I tell my father that I want to play the drums. And he says to me, "You're late," right? And then he calls Art, gets me the drums, sends me to Max Roach's home. And this is where life got really, really interesting for me because he didn't say one word to me about music for the next 5 years. Not one word. So I've gone from practicing 15 minutes a day to an hour a day to 2 hours a day to 5 hours a day to 8 hours a day. I'm just practicing all the time, and he don't say nothing to me. Now, the genius of that was that he wanted to make sure that if I was going to play these drums and I was going to do this jazz thing, it was going to be my idea. Wasn't going to be his idea. He knew that I had all these people that used to say to me, "Hey, man, you play the piano? You going to play the piano? You know, why don't you play the piano?" You know? So I had all this pressure on me, but he didn't put any pressure on me to be involved in music at all. And, but I'm scared. I'm scary, right? I ain't really playing out. I'm just practicing all the time. I'm just practicing. And so he comes in the house one night, him and his great saxophonist, Charlie Rouse, and they come in the house one night, and this is when I was like around 18, and they're talking about this drummer that they heard, this young boy that they heard, that he's a badass. Man, yeah, I'm gonna take him to Europe with me, right? So now, okay, now he's got my attention, cause and he's 17, and I'm only 18. It really ain't no real difference, but he's gonna take him to Europe, and he still hasn't said anything to me about music at all. But they say this, and he took this cat to Europe with him, right? And I was shook up. I was shook to the bone because naturally I'm saying to myself, well, he didn't take me to Europe with him, but he took this other kid to Europe with him, and this is how he got me off my behind, right? And the funny thing is that that young player and I became best of friends, best of friends. And he had actually studied with Max also, you know. But when he came back from Europe, right, he hired Ndugu, Leon Chancellor, and Leroy Williams. He had hired about 3 or 4 different drummers. And then he came through the house one day, almost 2 years later, and he just walked, because he used to walk through the living room, and I was still living with him. And he just looked at me, he said, "Are you ready to play?" Right? And I knew he wasn't talking about basketball. And about a week later, I was on the bandstand with him. And I'm eternally grateful to that man because the way he did it, he wanted to make sure that I wanted to play. And I was stupid enough because I asked my mother years later, I said, "Ma, Daddy never said nothing to me about, he never said, are you practicing? Are you studying? Just nothing." And I thought, I was stupid enough to think this guy who had elephant ears in the room right next to me wasn't listening to me for all those years, right? And my mother said, "Are you kidding? He listened to you every time you were practicing. And he knew when you were ready. And that's why he came through the house and he just said, 'Are you ready to play?'" And, you know, I am so grateful to my father because he then took me on the bandstand with him. I spent the last 5 years of his career as part of his band. And I was not obligated. You know, I remember he said to me, he said, "You know, you got to play in your time. You can't play in my time. You got to play in your time." And so when I went into R&B, right, this was 1975, you know, that was my time. I was 25 years old, you know, and there were a lot of people who were very upset that I had gone into R&B because, you know, it's like I was defiling the Monk name. And these were like real Monk fans. And I said, if y'all knew Monk, really knew what Monk was about, you would know that he would want me to be doing my own thing the same way he told Coltrane, play your own shit. The same way he told Miles, play your own shit. The same way he told Bud Powell, play your own shit, right? And so when I got a hit record in 1980, he was so proud I had figured out how to do this shit and didn't have nothing to do with him. He was delighted. He was absolutely delighted. Him and my mother, they couldn't believe that me and my sister had figured out how to be successful on our own name. Because I'll tell you something, the name Thelonious Monk in the world of R&B could open up a door, but that's all it could do was open up a door. He had no R&B history, even remotely. So I had to come up with the goods, you know. And I'm glad that you asked me to tell that story because.
Can I tell the coda to the story?
Go ahead.
Remember the coda? The first time I heard him, I heard him tell this story. We were celebrating his father's centennial here on campus. I gotten Robin G.D. Kelly, who has written the definitive biography of Monk. Believe me, he's the cat. Get that book if you haven't read it, because it puts to rest a lot of myths about Monk. He could Okay, so they're doing the panel discussion. I'm just Thelonious tells that story. As he tells the story, Robin reaches into his pocket, pulls out his phone. Because Robin had done all this exhaustive research on Martin. He had a bootleg recording of this young man at 19 at the Vanguard. He had never heard it before. He had never, and he had to leave the stage. It was so deep because he told the story as he told you, and he's telling you, you see the man he is. Now you know the two people that raised him to be that way. That man stepped back. That's a lot for a lot of musicians, push their children into doing their thing. No, 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 he stayed back. And Robin pulled that thing out and we played it. And it was just a moment, the whole crowd, we all lost it. He had to step back.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's for me. It's been I just want to say that it's been a magic carpet ride for me. You know, because I really did. I grew up in a house, for real. Miles Davis coming to the door, and Dizzy coming to the door, and Art coming to the door, and Max coming to the door, and Bird coming to the door, and Coltrane coming to the door, and Sonny Rollins coming to the door. And, I mean, all these cats would come to the door, and I wasn't required to be anything but my father's son, little Rudy Tootie. That's all I had to be, and I'm just so really grateful. I'll tell you some funny shit. So I go to this. So he sends me to this fancy school in Connecticut, right? A boarding school, right? Yeah. And I mean, this school cost like $10,000 in 1961. Wow. So a lot of money. I don't even know how because they sent my sister to a school like that also. I don't know how they did it on the money he was making, but they did it. A lot of sacrifice. But he comes up and visits me one day, right, on a visiting day. And I get in the car with him, and I think Rouse was in the car because they used to hang out a lot. I get in the car with him, and he says to me, look, man, you know, I'm gonna play a concert for the school, you dig? And after I play the concert for the school, they ain't gonna be able to throw you out. Right? So I know this is some jive, right? But he plays this concert at Darien, Connecticut, at Darien High School, and he had just been on the cover of Time magazine, and so, you know, he was the big Willie, and he gave all the bread to the school. He said, I'm gonna give him all the bread from the concert. And I have to tell you, there was nothing I could do to get thrown out at school.
You tried it too.
I became a terror. I was a terror. I mean, I remember I did something really egregious. I won't tell you what it was. But it was the kind of thing that you definitely get expelled, right? They called me up to the dean's office, and they said, you know, the Lions were very disappointed. And we're going to have to suspend you. But we're going to suspend you on campus. Now, that immediately told me that they weren't going to tell my parents. Right. And they knew I wasn't going to tell my parents. And I couldn't believe it. So I spent a week at this school, right, with nothing to do but hang out all day because there was nothing I could do to get thrown out of that school. My father he was a piece of work. I love you, Daddy. I love you. Really.
That was genius, though. That was a genius move. That's hilarious. Wow. Yes, we have a question.
Yes. A chant for Boo on the Crosswalk album. I'm curious about Boo.
Boo is.
A chant for Boo.
A tune called A Chant for Boo on the Crosstalk album. Abdullah Buhaina was actually Art Blakey's name. And A Chant for Boo was written by a great bass player who we actually lost this year. His name was Mickey Bass. And he wrote a chant for Boo. And that's interesting to me because my father and my father's brother lived next door. But the face I remember, my father and Art Blakey was so tight that I remember Art Blakey's face next to my father's before I remember his own brother's face next to my father. But Art comes, see, the cats went through this period, you know, just like with afros. Well, they went through this period where everybody was changing their name. And they were taking Muslim names, you know, by the 70s and 80s, we was doing this Swahili names and all that kind of stuff. So Art's name was Abdullah Buhaina, right? So he comes to my father and he says, Monk, you got to get yourself, you know, a Muslim name. You know, I'm Abdullah Buhaina right now. And my father says to him, man, no, you don't know, I understand your problem because your name is Arthur Blakey. But my name is Thelonious Spear Monk. You can't improve on that shit.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you for that question. That's a priceless story. Wow. Any other questions? Now's the time.
Somebody over there in the back, all the way in the back?
I can't see you.
Sure.
Gil
Gil
Scott
Scott?
Heron.
No, I didn't. But Gil Scott came along during my scary period anyway. So, but you know, it's funny because I was listening to Gil Scott on the radio the other day, and I think he's one of those voices of the black conscience that I think is underrated. You know, often we don't pay attention. Well, let me put it this way: I get so tired of all the lyrics. You know, I mean, there's great, you know, Smokey Robinson and Howlin' Dozier Holland and all of them. They wrote great lyrics, but you know, all that shake your booty and all that crap. We don't pay attention to the Gil Scotts of the world the way the greater society has paid attention to the words of, say, a Bob Dylan. But his words are just as, and have been just as powerful. And Gil Scott had a lot to say, you know, and I'm grateful that he came along in the era of recording where we can revisit him, because I heard a lyric for a composition the other day by Gil Scott on the radio that I had never heard before, and it just reinforced to me how heavy duty he really, really was, and it's a shame that we lost him so early. So in answer to your question, I would have to say, no, I never did, and I regret that I never did, because now that I know who he really was, I would have loved to have played something with him. His words are timeless.
Thank you for that. Any other questions as we wrap up?
Over here?
Casey? I can't hear you say that again.
You know, Art Blakey and Max Roach is enough. Are you kidding? No, really. You know, and you have to understand, studying with a Max Roach or an Art Blakey or any of the great drummers is really the ability to hang. You know, it's not a whole lot of sitting down and, you know, occasionally you may discuss a particular technique, but it's the hang. It's the hang that's important. It's the ability to be there and watch how they comport themselves. Watch how, you know, they play their music. watch how they interact with other people and other musicians. You know, it's kind of this like an osmosis that goes on. And if you got the right vibe in your soul, then you just absorb things, because you have to remember, in jazz, the objective is not to play what Max Roach played. The objective was to find myself. You dig? And that's what you do. You know, that's why European musicologists, you know, have always wanted to quantify jazz, you know, and put it in a formula and put it in a bottle and put it on the shelf so they could say, oh, Charlie Parker? Yeah, give me that bottle of Charlie Parker. And then they play like Charlie Parker. It doesn't work like that. And actually, Charlie Parker will punch you in the mouth. You know, he don't want you. He would be the first one to say to you, play your own shit, man. Don't play my shit. That has to do with my life. That has to do with my experience. Has to do with my DNA. You've got your own DNA. You've got your own life experience. So you have to understand it's very different in jazz than it is in European classical music. You know, jazz runs from the heart to the paper. The paper is the last stop for jazz. The paper is the first stop for European classical music. And so what you're trying to do with European classical music, with the great European classical players, is your ability to interpret the hell out of what's on the paper. You know, Bach wrote a bunch of stuff down. Beethoven wrote stuff down. Then you take a Jascha Heifetz or Yitzhak Perlman to perform what's on the paper. But even when they read what's on the paper, they're not playing exactly what's on the paper. They're interpreting what's on the paper. You know, it's about the feel. You know, if it's a violin, it's about the feel. It's about what's going on in your heart. You know, so studying, and that's why I said, you know, I started out by saying, Max Roach is enough. You know, and Max, you know, probably spent a little time with Papa Joe Jones or somebody like that. And Papa Joe Jones probably spent a little time with Sid Catlett or Chick Webb, you know, and you get the vibe, you dig? And then, you know, particularly for drums, you have to remember that with the drums, you know, if you want to play the saxophone or the trumpet has, and the piano have 300-400 years of material to study. But the drum set, we don't got no standard size drum. We don't got no standard size stick. We don't got no standard number of drums. We have no standards. So much of what you do on the drums, you've got to make it up yourself. You know, if you look at a drum chart might say something like, with a medium bounce. What the hell does that mean? You know, I mean, do you play drums? Well, then you know. You know with the kind of stuff, think about how much stuff you got to make up. When somebody puts a drum, oh yeah, you might have a few breaks and stuff that you got to read, but then all the other stuff, you can't even notate it. You can't even notate it because you got to make it up on the fly. On top of that, you got to make it up on the fly. So studying drums is, you know, it's really almost the youngest instrument. You know, because remember, if you look at Chick Webb or those drummers in the 20s and the 30s, guy had a bass drum here, had a snare drum over there, had some marimbas back there, and a gong over there, and you know, and it wasn't until really the 1940s that said, oh, well, they did the American thing, right? And you know the American thing is that, man, give me all that shit. Put all that shit together right here, you know? And that's when the bass drum and the snare drum is here and the cymbals right there, and all of that came together. So your instrument is a work in progress, and there's no standard way to hold the stick, right? You have no standards. It's really like the Wild West of drums. I mean, that's one of the things I liked about it. It was very exciting because you got to make shit up all the time, you know? Everybody else there's a book for the piano. There's a book for the saxophone. There's a book for the trumpet and a book for the guitar, you know? But there really ain't no book for the drums because you might play something, right? It's the same thing, you know? Who's got sticks back there? I heard them. I heard some sticks. But that's what it is. There's 10 different ways to play the same sound, depending on your body type. And if you're short and fat, you play one kind of way. If you're tall and slim, you play another kind of way. You know, there's no standard, even where the instrument is. I mean, the piano's right there. Everybody's playing the piano, sits down at the piano, it's right there. But you know, you sit down at another cat's set, and you got to readjust this and readjust that and readjust this and readjust that, because there's no standards. So studying with any drummer, you know, you got to kind of pick it. You don't want to copy them. You want to be influenced. That's what you look for with the drums. You look for influence. And influences can come from one guy or many guys. You know, my influence as a band leader is from Art Blakey. My influence as a player is from Max Roach, you know? But then my influence, you know, as a funk player is like cats like Bernard Purdy, you know? So the influence can come from all kinds of different places. All right?
Amazing. I have to thank you so much for just pouring into this room right now. Thank you so much for this priceless experience, and not only that, but you know, giving away your wares as well.
It's show business, and you know, this is the last thing I'll say. Because if you don't set me up, you know, I can go on forever. But you know what I found out? I found out when you take the time, right, for your fans, they become fans for life. You dig? So I'm very, very calculated. And I know, I know how to make a fan for life. You dig? So if I say to everybody, yeah, and I got these CDs right here, it's gonna cost you $15.95. That gets one vibe. But if I say, I got these CDs here, I don't got one for everybody, but I got enough. Here you go. You know what? Maybe 15 years from now, somebody will say, oh man, you know, I saw Monk one night, you know, he gave me that CD.
People
Y'all
always
take care.
They remember how you make them feel.
God bless all of you.
Yes, thank you so much. The album is called Two Continents, One Groove. And I don't know if you all have any more to give away. Yes, go see Wayne. Not all at once, but go see Wayne. And thank you so much, T.S. Monk.
Friday night, we have Amina Figueroa. Sunday afternoon, we have Mark Rose to the quartet with poets.